Welcome to the Shun podcast, where we expose religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Today we have another former member of Jehovah's Witnesses named Silvers, and there's some really unique aspects to his story. Homeless at 13, married at 16, everything from the blood issue to physical and sexual abuse, Silvers experienced it all. And not only did he experience so much, but he's still here standing to tell his story, and just him being able and willing to stand up and to tell this story is a huge step in and of itself. I'm not going to spoil it all here, but he's been through a lot. I even have an update of sorts that I'm going to share after the interview that I think is really cool. And if you stick around after the interview, you're going to also hear how the podcast is doing, what the next episode is about, and I'm going to give you some highlights from the Shun Podcast Facebook group. So let's go ahead and meet Silvers. Let's get to know him a little bit and his story.
My name is Silvers. I'm 42 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness and I am shunned.
All right, Silvers, then how did you become one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
Well, I was kind of born in. My grandmother started studying, from what I understand, with the witnesses and kind of brought my biological mother and father in. And so that's that's how it kind of got started with the family.
Gotcha. So you said that was this your maternal grandmother, you say?
My maternal grandmother.
And she brought in both your mom, which obviously kind of makes sense, but she also brought your dad in?
I think my dad was, honestly, I kind of think my dad felt it was bull crap from the beginning and just did anything because he loved my mom a lot
Gotcha.
At that time. And my grandmother also brought in the majority of the rest of the family on my mom's side, which would mean her sisters and her mother, some cousins, and it just kind of the ripple effect within a short period of time. A lot of the women in the on the my mom's side of the family had been married 5 or 6 times each. So I felt like they probably struggled a lot and was probably an easy target. They
Oh
were
yeah.
easy.
Yeah. They've got that vulnerability. They've had some issues in their life, and they're looking for something, obviously. So, um, sounds like your grandma was kind of patient zero for she kind of got this whole thing started in the family. So you were then kind of born in. So I assume then it was all you ever knew. Is that correct?
Not completely all I ever knew.
Okay.
There was kind of a more than kind of. There was a big blip when I was born over the blood issue. Uh, my biological mother, we're estranged now, so that's why I say biological.
Okay.
Um, uh, she, when she went into labor, she was losing so much blood, she needed a blood transfusion, and the family wasn't having it. So they were going to rush her to a hospital and did, 2 hours away from the original hospital, because the doctor said he would not uh, do anything with her without a blood transfusion. Well, on the way to the next hospital, she died, and they cut me out. They did a cesarean and got me out, and she was in a coma for 3 days. So during that time, my great aunt really this my great aunt really wanted me. I think my dad fought really hard for her to get a blood transfusion, but was up against uh, uh, too many other people in the family. Um, so that's kind of how I was introduced. And then for the next 4 years, I would live with my um, biological mother and father. So I have some pretty good, what I can remember, I have some pretty good memories of them, and they were kind of teetering, I think just to pacify my grandmother, teetering and going to the Kingdom Hall and until it fell apart.
Okay, so wow, that's quite a start to a story. It's quite a start to a life. So you were the blood issue, touched you very early, and I noticed that you said that your great aunt wanted you. Um, was she pursuing custody in some way, like why maybe while your mom was in a coma?
I don't know the complete details of that particular moment, although I do know that she has confessed, and there's been many other confessions, but one was that she was very jealous of my mother because my great aunt wasn't able to have children.
Mm,
And maybe she felt like having a child would make her life complete. And she did wish, death upon um, my mother. And this was a, Jehovah's Witness that was in, and I just find that so horrid, that she
yeah.
would wish death upon my mother so she would be able to get me. So she had been, having this in the forefront of her mind for the longest time, and actually she took care of me for the first 2 weeks when I got out of the hospital because my biological mother was still in the hospital recovering,
Yeah.
and she has flat out told me she just wished her dead so she could keep me. So this was her probably looking for any opportunity um, for that scenario to play out, and it would take 4 years, and it finally did for her.
All right. Wow, that's a lot of dysfunction to be brought uh into the world into because
Sure.
oh wow, that's heavy. So how do you so I mean you've already said that your biological parents, you've kind of alluded to, they had you something happened I guess at that 4 year mark. So what transpired or what happened that changed at that 4 year mark?
Um, I don't really know. I don't really get a clear picture, and I don't think I'll
Sure.
ever get a complete clear picture from the Jehovah's Witness side, um, just because they would like to paint it something different. I've had to do a lot of digging, and what I do know is that my great aunt's sister um, did try to get custody of me or temporary custody while my mom straightened herself out, which I think she got on a little bit of drugs. Um, of course, for witnesses, that could have meant she smoked a cigarette or smoked pot.
Yeah.
Um, and
One
they,
time.
right, and seized the opportunity. And I know that my great aunt, who did end up getting me for a, quite a few years, had a very big argument with her Jehovah's Witness sister, um, saying that if you don't let me have him, I'll never speak to you again. So to keep the peace, she let her sister, my great aunt, um, um, take over, uh, take me over legal conservatorship, which is what I found out later. I didn't. A lot of this came unraveled much later. I mean, or came to me in bits and pieces, and
Sure.
as I asked questions over the years, and I was able to piece the puzzle together, and then just flat out confessions once I uh, directly confronted them with paperwork and proof of
Man,
that time.
you're a human being, not a piece of property for people to fight over. That's that's really I don't even know. I'm sorry, man. That's just a really rough way to start life. What happened then with your parents? I mean, to get legal conservatorship or something, there would have to be a legal issue. In other words, it's not like or maybe I'm wrong and somehow they worked it out, but it's not like Jehovah's Witnesses could just have like a judicial committee and somehow take away your parents' ability to be parents. You know, this would be a legal issue. So uh, your parents, once you went to live with your great aunt, what happened to them? I mean, did they just give up the rights to you, or was there some sort of fight? Your biological parents?
Well, with my biological parents, from what I understand and what I've been told, is that my father went to jail, and my mother dropped me off um, at my um, at her mom's house, so my grandmother's house, and during that to be gone for a few days. And during that few days is when they decided to take the opportunity and say that she abandoned me, and then file for legal conservatorship of me, which was only supposed to be temporary. And I was told that um, it was something a little bit stronger than legal conservatorship. Um, that basically I was adopted um, by my great aunt.
Wow, that's a there's a lot of moving pieces there, and it's
Right,
kind of interesting to see all of that happening within Jehovah's Witnesses. To have so many people trying to, I don't know if maybe they felt they were trying to get you, like you said, with your great aunt. Maybe she was looking to fulfill some part of herself, or maybe she thought she could save you in some way. Being she could introduce you to quote the truth and get you to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses yourself. But
right. I believe that's definitely the case. I also believe, that she, even based on what she said, so it is that she couldn't have children, and she did want me really bad, and I felt like, uh, I feel like she really felt like she'd be more complete, and so my great aunt married um, within a few months of getting a legal conservatorship of me to a worldly, uh, uh, in the truth, a
yeah,
worldly man who was a cop. So I think she had it really thought out pretty well. If she's married to a cop, even though he's worldly, she'll have some financial security with this new um, son, quote unquote.
right.
And um, I guess she was prepared to deal with a little backlash from the congregation if that meant having a husband, a child, and then she could bring up the perfect child, basically, is what she thought, and all of her dreams would come true. And maybe she could bring her husband in, which she has tried her whole life to do.
Yeah, a lot of people try that. So then you were raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses by essentially your great aunt, from the time basically that you could uh, really have much knowledge of what is going on. You weren't a baby anymore,
Right.
or a toddler. So then, what was the worldview that you were given by the witnesses, by your great aunt? How did they have you see the world around you?
Well, first off, they isolated my parents from me. Um, so the deal was that my parents could have gotten me at any point had they just shown to the court a little initiative, but it was greatly blocked by my grandmother and especially my great aunt that was raising me, um, making them think that they didn't have any rights whatsoever and changing her number. My parents couldn't find me for a while. Um, and so, how I was viewed to see the world was that people were evil. Satan was out to specifically target me, and my mom was evil. My dad was evil. So,
Mm.
uh, of course, I didn't match with any memories I had of them. Um, and but over time, being told that they're evil, they're are under Satan's influence, or they're satanic, or they're demonic. Then, of course, that started to to infiltrate my mind to where I started to believe that that was true. Um, and everyone that I had interaction with that wasn't inside the truth or Jehovah's Witness
Right.
organization, um, uh, were to be viewed the same way. But definitely, I would definitely say my parents seem to be my biological parents seem to be the most uh, demonized, even more so than worldly people, are people that weren't Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, I can understand them doing that and why they did that.
Right.
That's it's quite manipulative. It sounds like they played a lot of games to keep your biological parents, away from you. So,
Yes.
so then, what was your childhood like growing up at home? This home with your great aunt. What was life like?
Very isolated, very controlling. It was very physically violent.
Mm.
Um, and there was sexual abuse, sexual grooming from my grandmother's husband, so my grandfather, um, who was a ministerial servant. And that grooming started almost immediately when when my aunt uh, got me at about 4.5. So, and having a one parental figure, my great aunt, that was not, or that was in uh, the Jehovah's Witness organization, and then having the other father figure, her husband, that was not, and him being a police officer, there was a lot of violence between those guys. That she was um, very much a yeller and screamer, and so is he. And it would just get pretty violent. And he was above the law because he was a policeman, and there was just a lot of things I could never talk about to anyone, um, both in the congregation and even outside the
Yeah,
congregation, just regular people. Because since he was a policeman, it would be hard for me to be believed on either side, or even be taken seriously.
yeah. I can see. I mean, you're really between a rock and a hard place there.
She did, she really liked her weekends to herself. So I would go visit my grandmother, and her husband, ministerial servant. And I just remember, from a small age, little bitty things that added up over a period of 7 years or so,
Hmm.
um, that would end up happening, that I wasn't realizing that I was being groomed.
Oh yeah. I mean, nobody ever realizes that.
And in fact, I really didn't realize I was being groomed until I sought therapy in my late 20s, early 30s. So,
Sure, sure. Yeah. I mean, that's manipulation is very hard to see. Um, I mean, heck, we were all manipulated just being in a cult. And
right.
and I didn't wake up from that till I was about 38 years old. So it's very hard to see what people who are very skilled at manipulating other people are doing in the moment, and then even years later. Um, how did things go for you? So it sounds like home life uh, wasn't very good, which might be saying it too nicely. Um, how was school? When you did at least have that time to maybe get away from the situation at home. When you went to school, what was that like for you as a young witness?
Well, I was made fun of a lot in school, um, and bullied a lot. Um, I do, I did have a couple of incidences which helped out. Like, my great aunt was a violent person, and so was her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember one specific incident where I was being had a smart mouth in class. Um, I mean, being repressed on all sides, there had to be some sort of outlet where I um, could express
Sure.
myself, be it negatively or not. So so I had kind of a mixed bag at school. So one incident got me sent to the principal's office, and this was back in a time period where teachers themselves could go in, and I'm not sure if they do that now, but teachers can go and spank their student. And I remember I bent over to get a spanking, and there were bruises all up and down my back, and she didn't give me a spanking. Instead, sat me down. I was probably about 7, and she sat me down and asked me where these bruises came from. And immediately I made up a lie, which was kind of interesting that I would just on the fly at 7 make up that type of lie. And she said that uh, she immediately recognized the lie and called CPS, which then they got a hold of my great aunt, which was such an embarrassment to her. And I really got it when I got home. Other things that happened in school is just being bullied by some of the even Jehovah's Witness kids in the congregation that went to the same school as me. Um, and um, just, I was just kind of an oddball, um, and kind of let I guess the pressure cooker effect came out at school. I didn't, I just kind of acted out a lot. Um, Finally, I did stand up for myself towards the uh, beginning of high school, and had pretty much had enough of the abuse seemingly coming from every direction. And so when some of the um, hotshot bullies in school finally approached to me, I had enough, and I got into a lot of fights and whipped their butts. And then, kind of towards the end of high school, I became popular because I wouldn't take any crap, and also I was pretty comical about it. So that was my way of coping.
You were like you were the because a lot of people, when they have a lot of bad things in their life, they turn to comedy essentially to being the funny guy, and it's just kind of interesting to see you as the fighter and the funny guy at the same time. That's an interesting outlet for all of that. I think that's kind of great that at least you were able to kind of take back your life a little bit in that one small way, even in school. So, how was it at the Kingdom Hall then for you? Growing up, it sounds like you said that even the kids who went to school with you from the same congregation were bullying you at school. So it doesn't bode well for the Kingdom Hall. But how was life for you there?
Um, it was a little lonely. I was an only child, so and I will say that on a spectrum, because to me, I feel like there is a spectrum inside of Jehovah's Witness
Oh
organization
yeah.
where there are um, families that are a lot more lax and lenient towards their children than others, and I I was on the spectrum of just being abused quite a bit and it being covered up. So because of that, I felt isolated. I acted isolated. What I did do is I studied very hard to be able to give the best comments I possibly could, so I could at least, if nothing else, be um, quote unquote spiritually strong, and um, and that's really kind of how it played out for me in the Kingdom Hall. Just people were more standoffish and did make fun of me, and it hurt my feelings quite a bit. But I just really tried to stay focused on being like the fastest one that could look up a scripture, and just the I did what I could to kind of survive that situation. And then my uh, great aunt was not very um, keen on, since she had a worldly husband, she was already kind of marked, so to, and in the congregation as kind of keep your distance, sort of, from her.
Of
So
course.
that kind of bled down to me as well. Um, so that's kind of how it was on that.
So, did you at least, trying to be the best witness you could be, as far as being, quote, like you said, spiritually strong and giving good comments or maybe talks or whatever, did you at least get maybe some praise for that? Was that at least maybe a little oasis in the desert for you?
For a time it was. Um, Definitely giving talks was, and trying to, uh, be the most spiritually strong person I could be was something I clung on to. Um, and being able to hear if I, did a good job doing a talk, and was kind of, uh, the my outlet, I suppose, or
Sure.
my focus during that time period.
Sure. I was just thinking, you can see how sometimes you have kids in a kingdom hall that don't have a lot going for them. Even in their own family or at school, there are a lot of kids that go through a lot of different types of abuse in the kingdom hall, and you can kind of see how just that setup, then these kids are trying to find something good in their life, something to be praised for, something that people will like them for. So they go to the kingdom hall,
Sure.
and naturally, you're going to do what you can to get that praise, to get whatever, and you watch these kids almost in their own way being pushed and manipulated, even though maybe nobody's even trying to. The kid is naturally going to gravitate toward where he can get some positive reaction. So if that positive reaction can come from being the best little J-Dub in the Kingdom Hall and getting baptized and giving the perfect talks and looking the part and playing that role, then of course any kid's going to do that. And then of course, we all know there are repercussions later if you decide to go back once you've been baptized. You've already committed yourself. But you can see why kids do that in a congregation and why they try to stand out. And so often it's just because they don't have anything else going for them and they want to get praise and validation, and that's one way and one place where maybe they can finally get it by playing a role essentially.
Right, right.
So for yourself, you're kind of playing that role a little bit, at least at times getting some of this praise. As you're going into your teenage years, young adulthood, how did things progress? Not only, I don't know if there were any life changes that occurred during them, but also, within the congregation, did you get baptized? Did you do anything uh, that was notable in your life as things were, as you were transitioning, as you were growing as a young human being?
Sure. I did get privileges in the congregation, doing the mics, and which is, that's a huge deal, of being able to to go walk with the microphone to hand to someone to make a comment. Um, let's see. Baptism. I got baptized at, let's say, around 11 or 12ish.
Ooh, that's pretty young.
Uh, and really the reason, I really felt like I wasn't ready, but I wanted to be more accepted in the congregation. Um, and I had befriended an elder's son, and he was the only one in his family getting baptized at that convention, and I started asking him a lot of questions, and he basically told me how to answer all the questions so it would make sure I get baptized.
You had
And
a cheat sheet.
I remember sitting in front of, um, the elders, answering the questions and making sure that I remembered everything he told me to say, because I just wanted to get baptized. I felt like if I got baptized, that maybe the abuse would end, that I would be seen in a different light, um, that maybe God or Jehovah would approve of me even more, um, and that it would be the catalyst to help, um, what I was holding in, all the abuse. And when I say abuse, I mean there were not only was it physical and sexual, but it was uh, a really interesting dynamic of if I made anything less than a B at school, I would have to sit on the edge of my bed for 6 months at a time. So when I got home, I would sit on the edge of my bed until it was dinner time. I was allowed one bathroom break. Um, and then I was allowed to take my bath and then go to bed for 6 months at a time until the next report card.
Wait, like that was
Um,
your whole life?
that
Was
was
get home from school, sit on the edge of your bed, one bathroom break, dinner, bed, that's it? Like for 6
that,
months?
that's correct until the
Holy
next
crap.
report card time. And then if I made anything less than a B, it would be another 6 weeks until the next report card. The same scenario. So there were literally years um, that I sat on the edge of my bed,
That's
and
such a strange punishment.
it,
That's
it is a very strange punishment.
who
And
thought that up? That's
that was my great aunt. That was her trying to, um, well, I would say more. Honestly, I would say that on some levels, on a lot of levels, life wasn't didn't turn out like she expected.
and
She was
so
being
she took it out on you.
right. So to kind of get me more out of the equation, so she could have some free time, um, then basically, have me sit on the bed and be quiet, um, so she didn't have to deal with a child, which
Why
I
did
which I
she
think is
take
ironic.
you then?
I know.
Why fight for you and why do all this if she doesn't want you on, if she wants her weekends free, so she ships you off to your grandparents and your, as you said, your ministerial servant grandmother's husband, was sexually abusing you, and at home she's abusing you. I see this happen. I know it happens a lot. I know a lot of kids are fostered or even adopted. Like I think you said that you might have actually been legally. And then these people, they get these kids and they just abuse them. And I don't get it. I don't know if it's just an outlet for them or what, but it's the most horrific thing. And it really kind of pisses me off. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that because here you have somebody who says that she wants you so badly, and then the signal she's sending is anything but that, and she's just trying to control you and make you what she wants you to be. It's all about her. It's not about you. And yeah,
Exactly.
that's just it's just stupefying. It just blows my mind. I'm sorry, man. That's such a awful thing. What do you so? I don't know if this question is too much, let me know. But so you're a kid, you're sitting on your bed, on the edge of your bed for 6 months at a time. What do you do? Do you just escape mentally? Do you make up scenarios, have an imagination? How do you escape that prison essentially that you've been put in?
Good question. I think I disassociated a lot
Yeah.
in my mind. Um, I just remember it being extremely boring, um, and there was a lot of crying. Of course, I
Sure.
couldn't allow that to be seen, or I would get in trouble. Um, so I think I just kind of blanked out, and um, quite honestly, that did affect my adult life. I mean, sometimes I do find myself, and especially when I did start getting therapy, I did find myself sitting, ironically, on the edge of my bed, just kind of staring off into the distance with maybe empty thoughts.
Mm.
And once I figured out that, oh my gosh, I did this so much as a child. I'm just so used to when just kind of sitting here and staring off into
Yep.
nothing and kind of being numb. Uh, then I began some real work, kind of this, as life progressed. That's what I've realized.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, they put prisoners in prison in isolation. They put them in solitary confinement, and it's a very difficult thing for people. And I understand that you still maybe had school to go to or meetings or whatever, so it's not like you were completely isolated.
Right.
But I mean, that's torture. You were also a child. That's horrific. And how anybody can rationalize that in their mind is beyond me. Um, so it really,
Me too.
yeah, yeah. And I appreciate you answering that because it is, yeah, dissociation makes sense. You're going to dissociate from what's happening, and you know, we all the brain has its own mechanisms of escape if we aren't able to come up with ones. So, and I take it that dissociation was probably a part of a lot of your life. Just, you know, as these horrible things were happening, that's a natural thing that human beings do. So you got baptized at 11. You're going through your teenage years. You're doing things. How, you know, there comes, I guess, a point when everyone reaches that point where they start to maybe drive at, well, whatever age you could get a license where you lived, or there's the point that where people graduate high school and have choices to make or become 18 and a legal adult. So did things begin to change for you as you got older a little bit?
Absolutely. At the age of 12, I finally had enough um, of the sexual abuse, the um, physical abuse. Not only that, watching, and at the age of 12, I was still mentally, even though there was a large part of me that believed that maybe what my great aunt was doing and how she was treating me, um, and some level was directed from God,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I was trained to believe.
Yeah.
But as uh, I guess I just couldn't take it anymore. Watching my great uncle beat her into a pulp many times, and her having bruises on her, and I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't take the sexual abuse anymore. So that came out. And of course, I was called every name in the book by my great aunt. I had a judicial committee meet with me and ask me all kinds of questions. And I've got my privileges taken away because I didn't scream, I didn't yell.
Wait,
uh,
wait. You got your privileges taken away because you didn't scream over the sexual abuse?
right.
And who would have heard you? I mean,
That exactly.
uh,
Yeah,
okay.
that just makes sense. You know how I think this was a common Jehovah's Witness thing, that if a woman is getting raped or someone's getting raped, you are to fight with everything you've got,
Yeah.
and if you don't say no and fight, um, regardless of the situation, even if fighting meant someone blowing your head off, then you're basically consenting.
Yeah, or even if you were a little kid that was groomed and had no voice and were up against all odds. It's the stupidest thing. Actually, I think they take it from the Bible, which says a little something, but it's it's just crazy that they would put this on a child and say, "Well, you didn't scream, and therefore we're going to punish you." I mean, it takes victim blaming to a whole new level to punish
Sure.
the victim.
Sure, and to have your privileges taken away, which was my only thing I had going for me, I felt.
Yeah,
Um,
let's pile on silvers here.
right, to have that taken away from me, I was just absolutely devastated. So that was uh, the kickoff, basically, of me standing up for myself. I put up with it for about another 6 months, and I remember having dinner, and this is what changed it all in my life. Started to change for better and worse. um, so we were having dinner, and like I said, my great uncle was a pretty violent person and beat my great aunt a lot, and in turn she was kind of violent towards me and beat me a lot. But anyway, kind of a typical dinner, if he was grumpy, which was often, would be he would, if I gagged on anything like kids do, if I'm having canned carrots or something like that, hey, I would get backhanded and told to eat it with the approval of my great aunt, or maybe not with the approval. I'm not really sure. She was pretty scared of him too, but she was also really mouthy and stood up for herself a lot, which also caused her to get beat and me to get beat. Anyway, I had just really had enough. And he went to backhand me. I gagged on something, and what he would normally do is flip the whole entire dining room table over and place
Sounds
food back.
reasonable.
Yeah, that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. That's insane.
So I remember he went to backhand me, and I um, stood up. And at this point, I'm a tall guy, and by 12 years old, I was already over 6 foot tall. So I remember I stood up and I told him to go ahead and do it. And if he did it, that he better make sure he kills me, because I was going to kill him. I was going to take one of his guns and blow his head off. And then I pointed to my great aunt and I said, and if you touch her again while I'm living here, I will also kill you. I said, you will never abuse me again, and you will never abuse her again. This is just me standing up at 12.
Nice. Wow,
And
that's big. That's a big deal at 12.
it was a big deal. And the look on his face, I'd never seen that type of look before, especially from him. And his eyes were just huge because he knew I meant it. And I did mean it at that
Yeah,
time.
you had nothing to lose.
I did. I felt like I didn't have anything to lose. And I looked at my great aunt too, just a brief glance. And there was sort of a beaming from her, like someone stood up for her. But I really couldn't let that sink in because I was too busy just trying to stand up against injustice that I felt was happening all around me at home. And so then I went to my bedroom, and within a couple of weeks, um, uh, another family um, took me under their wing briefly. And when they did, they were so nice and so lenient in a lot of ways. And I was such a loaded spring that I only lasted about 8 months there, and before I ran away, just because there was, yeah, I ran away at 13 from them. Um, they were, I will say, they were Jehovah's Witnesses as well. They didn't approve of the abuse um, to that extent. And when I ran away from them is when we were hanging out. So I was about 13. We were hanging out with um, some of their friends, and they had some little girls that were probably about 8 or 9. And I remember that Jehovah's Witness sister leaning over to her other Jehovah's Witness friend saying, we need to make sure to keep him away from the little girls because I heard that he had been molested.
Oh, God.
And to hear that at 13, after I feel so strongly about uh, I feel so strongly against pedophilia that it made it feel like they were putting me in that category way before anything could even happen, or judging me because it was just another judgment. So
Can
I
I
left.
ask you something? So you are punished for not screaming, correct?
That's correct.
Was your abuser, your grandfather, was he punished?
He was punished, and he got reinstated really fast. Um, but yes, he
So
was.
so they took this then at the so I'm just trying to understand. So either he confessed or they took this at the evidence of just one person, or had he molested other people?
At that time, they did not know that, or I did not know that he had molested other people.
Oh. Okay.
And he blamed it on me. He said I was walking, which I find really hilarious and disgusting.
Yeah.
Um, I do deflect a lot with comedy, so my sense of humor sometimes could, take a tragic situation that maybe shouldn't be laughed at, and I
Sure.
turn it into something
Everyone does.
funny. And anyway, he said I was walking a little too sexy in front of him coming out of the bathroom in my underwear.
Yeah, so basically you were asking for it, right? I mean,
Right.
you were tempting
I was
him.
asking for it. Correct.
Oh God. Okay. So what I was wondering was, because you were punished for not screaming, I was just thinking it would have been the ultimate irony if then he was not punished because, if you didn't scream and he wasn't punished, if he's not punished, then nothing actually happened, So then how could you be punished for not screaming? So I guess he then must have either admitted it outright or maybe there were other accusations against him that added up to the quote two witnesses that they need in order to handle it. Um, was it ever reported to the police? I mean,
You
you
know,
literally lived with a cop.
so that is, this is kind of just coming to me. Um, but honestly, since my great aunt's husband was never a Jehovah's Witness, and he felt like I remember many arguments with those two, and him telling her that she was brainwashing me, um, which ironically would turn out to be true.
Yeah, you actually had
Uh,
that right.
so the he caught wind of what was going on, and CPS got involved.
Hmm.
That is how the only way CPS got involved. And it wasn't that he wanted CPS to be necessarily involved because he was a cop, and then to have someone under his roof having been molested would reflect on him as a police officer in his career. So he was trying to protect his career as best he could, and it just really all got swept under the rug. The elders, I'm sure, demonized me for the situation, and also had a talk with my aunt about not pursuing it, and so nothing was really pursued. I do remember getting questioned by CPS, um, and nothing really came of it. And I guess I was in such shock. I didn't really know, and I was so embarrassed
Well, sure.
about the whole thing, humiliated, embarrassed at the, and just kind of went with whatever I was told to do. And then it wouldn't take long before I did stand up to myself and get out of that situation.
I mean, literally everyone failed you. You were surrounded by all these adults, and adult after adult either they abused you, and then when they weren't abusing you and actually had a chance to do something good, they still failed you, and it's just so horrible. That kids get trapped in that situation, and I was asking about some of that because you're saying now that you've taken the stand for yourself and you're 13 and then you overhear somebody telling somebody else to keep their girls away from you because you had been molested. And I was just kind of wondering how they were to know that they weren't.
I told them.
Oh, you told them. Oh,
I
okay.
told them because I really wanted to have an outlet,
I
and
gotcha.
it seemed safe.
And then, of
And
course, they're
I
going to
felt
fail
like I
you
was
again and demonize you.
right. I felt like I was extremely violated. That when I heard her tell that to another sister, um, then I felt really violated. I felt put into a label put on me that I didn't deserve.
Oh, yeah.
And I felt like at that point I had absolutely nothing to lose by living on the street. Anything would be better than being to live with those kind of labels that I knew wasn't me. Um, and so that's I did end up living on the street from the age of little over 13 till about 16 when I got married.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk about then. There's a lot here. So let's talk about then. So you're living on the street. at such a young age. I mean, what was that like? Was it good on a level for you? I mean, did it feel good in just in that uh, you were free from the weird controls and the false accusations and things like that? You know, just for a fresh start, even an on the streets fresh start is a fresh start. Did Was that good for you on a level, or was it just an awful situation? I mean, the streets for a kid like that, I assume, could be just another horrible situation for you.
Well, for that time period, from the age of 13 to till I got married and a little beyond, it was an okay situation. I There was a lot of kindness from people. I don't really remember where I slept a lot, but I do know that there was a lot of kindness from strangers. Um, I did go to school, so I kept that routine down. I continued to go to high
Nice.
school. And I just remember like the lunchroom, they had a free lunch program. So I would load up, so I would have dinner. Um, and Then I started going actually, um, I started attending the Kingdom Hall again, but a different one because I thought that, despite all of that, that was an isolated, you know, I had never heard of anything like that in going
Yeah.
in the congregation through the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I really thought like that was isolated, and I just if I studied some more and put more faith in the Jehovah's Witness organization, or Jehovah as they like to advance it, then then maybe this time around it would be different. So
It's isn't it interesting that living on the streets was preferable and better than living among all of these Jehovah's Witnesses that you had been with your whole life? I mean, that's fascinating. That when you talk about living on the streets, one of the first things you're talking about is the kindness of strangers, and these were the quote worldly people who were supposed to be so awful and treat you so poorly, and yet it was better for you on the streets than at home.
right, and
That's
during
amazing.
the yeah, it is amazing.
It's wow. It says a lot. So you end up going to a Kingdom Hall. Did you How did that play out? I mean, did you end up? I understand what you were trying to do. And I understand thinking, well, this is just my isolated kind of crazy family or whatever. And obviously, I am not indicting all Jehovah's Witness families and saying that they're like what you grew up in. But when you went to this other congregation, did you did you start to see things differently in any way? I mean, was it more accepting of you, or how were you treated there as this kid kind of coming in off the streets? I assume you had a publisher's card or whatever that would be sent to this new Kingdom Hall. And also, where the heck was your great aunt and uncle? Did they not try to get you back or anything?
No, because what I found out is that she never had a full legal conservatorship of me. She had something lesser than that, to where my either one of my parents could have gotten me at any time, which then it made a lot of sense why she kept me away from them, and also fed both of them lies whenever they would frantically call. I remember especially my biological mother frantically calling so many times, um, and if it was me that answered, me being told to hang up on her. So if you could imagine a mother calling her child frantically, and I was told to hang up, and then that child hanging up on her. So all the while thinking she didn't have any rights to me at all whenever she did. Um,
Yeah.
It was just a lie that was pushed onto both her and my father.
Gosh, they just screwed over so many people.
Right.
I mean, it's so. How did you deal then? So that answers the part about your great aunt and great uncle not coming after you or pursuing you. What about this new kingdom hall, this new congregation? Uh, did your reputation precede you there, or did you fit in there? How did that go for you?
You know, I did kind of fit in a little bit. I felt there. Remember the elders' um, sons that I had befriended before I got baptized and
Right.
after. They had switched to that congregation, and they had a very large family. So I kind of felt a little bit more safe and our and that I had some outlets of people to talk to, and some people to hang out. And now that I was married, I got to hang out with the married couples, the young married couple.
Okay,
And
so let's get to the marriage then, because that has already happened. I didn't realize that had happened. So, how did you get married at 16 or whatever? Like, I mean, I guess your parents had no legal right over you, but how'd you meet somebody? Was that on the streets? Was that at the Kingdom Hall?
it was through someone I knew at the Kingdom Hall said, "Hey, I think you might like this girl." Um, uh, and we met and we just started dating. Never had sex before marriage, none of that stuff. We got married, and then of course, she got pregnant, um, and we had started going to the Kingdom Hall
Hmm.
um, very regularly. And actually, we got a little apartment. 2 blocks from the Kingdom Hall, so there was really, kind of no excuse or whatever you say of
Yeah, you can't say the car broke down and I couldn't make it to the Kingdom Hall.
right. And she wasn't. She was a female, and I throw that out there because the sisters in the congregation really helped with uh, making her feel maybe say more comfortable at the beginning. Um, she wasn't a witness. The gal I married.
Oh, okay. So wait, a witness introduced you to this girl, but she wasn't a witness?
Right. It was
Huh.
a young. Yes. It was it was a young witness that introduced me to this girl she was going to school with. Um, so yeah, that was kind of odd, but
Yeah, that
it,
is.
to me, it was kind of almost, that was such a whirlwind back then. It was kind of whatever it took
Oh,
to
sure.
yeah, to be accepted and to and now where I'm switching over to, my hormones are still raging at 16. I don't feel like that's ever a good time to get married. Um, but now it's switched over into my own uh, what I perceived as to be the perfect marriage and perfect life. Um, uh, the sort of a white picket fence scenario, maybe not the white picket fence, but you get my drift, I
Oh,
think.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So now I was creating in my mind, I now she's pregnant, we have a child on the way, um, and we're going to the Kingdom Hall, and um, I felt like everything was falling into place for me.
Yeah, it seems like for the first time you're feeling some stability and a place to call home
Right.
and like you're starting to fit in. Did your wife take to the witness culture? Did How did that go?
Um, you know,
Did she get baptized? Did she start
she,
studying? Did she attend
she
meetings with
did
you?
she did study quite a bit, and we were friends with the local elder and their kids, which were about our age, but neither one of them were married because they were smart. And so we hung out with them a lot. Um, and she did study. She never got baptized, and honestly, I'm not really sure. I think she really struggled on whether or not it was the truth, and she never really told me until much later what her opinions on that were. And I really feel like I was so blinded by my own quest for normalcy,
Yeah.
that there was a lot of things I could not see then that I would find out later.
So then, how did things go? I mean, you've got this seemingly stable white picket fence situation, as you said. You're in your late teens. Do you go to college? Uh, do you just start working and living life? How do things kind of progress? Through your late teens, early 20s, in your life, because that's a pivotal point in a lot of people's lives where some independence is finally reached. Of course, I mean, you got yours earlier than that, even. But how did things progress as you went forward through this next chapter of your life?
Well, around the age of 19, so my son would have been near 3 years old or right at three. Um, and let's see, I always wanted, I didn't have very many friends, and I had this guy from the congregation became my best friend, and I was just so ecstatic to have a really have a friend I could do things with, a friend I can go fishing with. He was married young, um, to a Jehovah's Witness girl, and they would come over a lot and hang out with us, and I guess it was about 19, nearing 20, that I found out she had been having an affair with that brother. Um,
Oh, your wife
so,
had?
right.
Oh, wow.
So I remember they both went into a judicial committee and nothing was done, and the elders encouraged me to forgive her. Um, so I did, and then to fast forward another 6 months or 8 months or so, it happened again. And again, the elders asked me to just forgive her. And I'm assuming it was because maybe her mother was coming to the Kingdom Hall. So they didn't want to, and she wasn't baptized.
Oh, so there's a
Um,
chance of roping in her mother. So
right.
Silvers has to keep forgiving his wife.
Correct. So the third time it happened, um, it had been a little while. I thought we were over it, and the third time it happened, um, I mean, I had a really good job at that point, three figures a year for at a very young age. Saw all the people my age going out having fun, but here I'm a father, responsible, work 12 hours a day, only to be cheated on. And basically, my whole entire concept of what I thought a Christian life should be, or just even a life of normalcy, was just kind of blown out of the water. My mind was blown, and I um, decided that this time I did not want the elder's assistance in my decision uh, with my wife. That I knew scripturally, based on what Jehovah's Witness taught, that I uh, we did not have to stay with her, because now, not the first time, not the second time, and especially three times. So, uh,
Third strike, you're
I,
out.
right. So I sat her down and told her I wanted a divorce, and that would, um, and then we separated. So what I did, I honestly felt like I wanted to just explore life at that point, and I really did it so haphazardly and so um, not caring about um, whether or not I lived or died. I couldn't understand anything. To me, nothing seemed to match with what was being said in the congregation. Um, and so I did get into some drugs there for a year, actually a lot of drugs for about a year. Um, so and then after a year, I did pull myself out of that, and then went to college and um, and started studying psychology, actually.
Oh, nice.
It kind of, I was wanting to help other people maybe not go through what I'd went through, and then within a few semesters, I realized that I probably need to help myself a lot more.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who take psychology degrees are in it to help themselves just as much as they are anyone else.
Sure.
So you studied psychology. Did you finish the program or?
I did not. Um, I would, I needed to go back to work
Mhm.
uh, to to support myself, and
Sure.
I paid for the divorce, and and that was a big chunk. And also my father passed away. I think I maybe need to backtrack just a tiny bit. My grandmother did pass away when I was 10 years old. She never got to know about the molestation
Oh
that
wow.
her husband did. My biological father passed away when I was 22. So I was just a year off of drugs, going to school, working full time, and um, and so that was pretty intense for me. So it just kind of seems like trauma over trauma after trauma.
Yeah.
Um, so at 22, after he died, I kind of just went numb for a really long time, um, for years, actually.
And so you say you went numb. Was that, I'm trying to follow the timeline? Was that back in? Did you go back into drugs and things like that to escape and to numb, or was it just more of a like a depression or something like that?
I think more of a depression and a shock,
Yeah.
and just stayed in shock for quite some time. I really didn't. It was really hard for that to sink in because I did get to know my father before, like a good um, maybe 5 years before that, and we had built a pretty decent, I would say, a really awesome relationship. We went fishing, and my son and him and I uh, and talked and a lot and about spirituality. He was very kind. He never said a harsh word about anyone. He didn't even say a harsh word about Jehovah's Witnesses. Whenever he found out about that he was lied to, he just took a deep breath. He cried a little bit and he said, "Well, let's just move on from here." He was just a really laid back guy. And so losing that, um, kind of my only, well, maybe my only support, I I feel like I fell into a free fall for so long. I did just work, and I didn't do drugs other than I did smoke marijuana, and I did drink, and I started working at a bar and started drinking probably. Well, there's no probably. I was drinking too much there for a couple of years working at a
Sure.
bar, and then something kind of washed over me, and I decided that there were so many dreams. I was like, well, what did I dream about when I was little? And I always wanted to live in the mountains. Um, so I started making my preparations to start following some of those dreams. So I moved up to Montana for a while and went to the University of Montana, continued on my psychology degree, which
Go
then turned,
Grizzlies.
yeah, go Grizzlies, and and which turned into art. And I started working on art, my own artwork, and then I got into some art courses, and did a few things. Maybe my father had said he always wanted to do, and it would take me about 5 years before I actually even cried that he passed away. I remember I climbed this mountain near the University of Montana and got it to the top, which took forever, it seemed, and just lost it. All the tears came flooding down from that. So I was able to get a really nice release, uh, and deal with start dealing with the grief over that.
Yeah, it's a pretty beautiful moment to be able to, and very unexpected, I assume, to be able to have that moment at the top of that mountain to grieve your father. I'm so sorry that um, that you were robbed of a relationship with him for so long, but I'm glad that before the end you did get to have a relationship with him and to finally get to to work out some of that stuff and to go fishing and take your kid and all that. I mean that just sounds like a beautiful time in your life. I'm sorry that it was as temporary as it was, but I'm really glad that you got to have that.
Yeah, me too. It really is something that I look back on and I smile. It's something that I look back on and reflect on the kind of man he was and try to incorporate that as much into my being as possible.
Yeah, so okay, so he passes, you go numb for a while. You end up you've gone to the University of Montana and things like that. At any point in this period, did you start looking at the doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses, or uh, did you get disfellowshipped and leave, or did anything happen therein that changed your, I guess, your status, your relationship with the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yes. Before I ventured out to go um, explore my dreams, um, I did get disfellowshipped, and that was during the divorce. Ironically, my wife at the time called the elders and made up a story about me, which basically the story was that I was giving alcohol to minors. It was not true, and they disfellowshipped me. I would not meet with them, and because I told them that it was a bogus and that we weren't even living together pending a divorce, and they disfellowshipped me um, without me even meeting. I refused to meet with them. So,
Yeah, it's the old disfellowshipping by default.
right. So I ran into a guy at the bar I worked at, and he had been disfellowshipped, and um, he was a he just kind of talked to me for a little bit, and it was my first time I realized I wasn't alone. That this guy wasn't a bad guy, and um, and I didn't really want to get in depth. I was still really very scared of talking about the religion. Um, so, but I did feel a little bit of relief that there's somebody out there like, that had a similar maybe experience. And he started telling me to question things. And about that time, I was listening to the radio and I heard there was a special coming on in the morning about the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. So that, of course, caught my attention, and I tuned in at that time. This would have been, um, almost 20 years ago. And I remember listening to this lady speak about the different things, the different doctrines, and I called in actually on that show, and I had a couple of questions, and it was very quickly, my questions were very quickly debunked, and I felt really like a fool, but I recorded it, and I kept that recording when I moved um, to go pursue my dreams, and while I was in school, I ran across I ran across a pamphlet um, about the Jehovah's Witness cult, and I always felt really guilty reading it. So I'd read like one page and I'd close off and I would just do something else. And um, in this pamphlet, towards the end, it had Crisis of Conscience in there, and I ordered it from Barnes and Nobles, and I ordered it for them to stock it. They didn't have it, and they stocked it, and I didn't have any money. I was going to school at the time, and I was just kind of barely getting by. So I just remember sitting at Barnes and Nobles and reading it from cover to cover several times. I just went in there and read it, and I was really blown away. Um, my brain had a hard time wrapping itself around what I was reading, And this was, the internet was just starting. I mean, there was no Facebook, maybe MySpace, maybe going on a little bit. Um, and I was too busy, with school and still numbing myself by drinking at night, partying with friends. So, and that was my 20s. So the next, the wake ups would be, they would come in stages. Um, a lot of times I would revert back and go, okay, these things are just what I'm reading is can't be true, and I'll kind of read some more Jehovah's Witness material, that I found at laundromats or something like that, and just held on that, or kind of floated. I don't know how what's a good word to say.
So you would just when you would find that information, it just kind of puts you back in that place as a witness a little bit. Is that what you're saying?
When I would find about it being the false doctrines and different things like that, I would latch on, and I would get really angry at the Jehovah's Witness organization. But then there was this part of me that was definitely trained from the Jehovah's Witness organization that, you know, sometimes they say that there are some, situations in the Kingdom Hall where you need to forgive your brothers and
Right.
different things like that, and that you're not really a godly person if you can't get over something, kind of leave it in Jehovah's hands. And so, even though I was being confronted with all this hard evidence of the false doctrines and many different other things, I would get angry, and then slowly I'd start to slip back into, well, gee, I think I need to just forgive and forget, let go. But all that did ultimately was just keep the trauma buried. And it wasn't until I was 30 that I had a panic attack, which I thought was a heart attack. And I went to the emergency room, and they told me it was a panic attack. And what precipitated that, or what led up to that, is one of the things I always wanted to do is live off the grid in a cabin in the mountains.
Nice.
And yeah. So I saved up all these different books on spirituality, from Buddhist to Hinduism, you name it. I had it, and I wanted to read them and study them. So I lived off the grid, no electricity. I had solar. I had electricity via, like a generator and stuff like that, and then a garden. And I would say it was the happiest year ever of my life.
Hmm.
And I read all these different spiritual beliefs, and so I'm pouring all these different religions into my brain, trying to just sort out what is truth, what is not. And I had a complete and utter meltdown. It's when I started having flashbacks of how far back the grooming went, um, and just these horrendous childhood flashbacks of things that I had forgotten, or things that I even remembered, but was now realizing that these are huge things in the way they impacted the way I interacted with people, the way as my self-awareness grew, I suppose, and the way that some of my reactions to things were counterproductive. And it just, um, like a ticking time bomb, it just kind of went off, and ended up in the hospital, and they said it was a panic attack. I ended up in therapy. They diagnosed me with PTSD, and that was 10 years ago, or actually 12 years ago. And they, through therapy and different therapists and doctors, I've slowly been unraveling. This is a 12-year-long process now that has gotten me to the point where I am now, of this kind of slowly unraveling of what happened in my childhood, and that it was not okay. uh,
Yeah.
and that there are different tools that I'm learning and have learned to integrate into my uh, awareness and my reactions to help with being able to cope
Um, I, 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 I guess it's a little regressive, but it just hit me while you were talking about all that. Whatever happened with your ministerial servant husband of your grandmother, your grandfather? Did he ever pay a price other than maybe being disfellowshipped or whatever? Is did he? I mean, was he still around kids after that? Is he alive today, or whatever happened to him? What was his eventuality?
You know, I had up until I guess the age of 34, I would occasionally check in with my Jehovah's Witness family. Um, and they just said that, he was really sorry and that he was doing really good in the truth
Mm.
as a Jehovah's Witness, and that I should consider forgiving him. And I kept reminding them that it wasn't really about forgiveness anymore. It was more that I wasn't going to put myself in. Uh, I just didn't want to talk to him. There was nothing to talk about.
Yeah, of course.
And it,
But I mean, he could have still been around kids at the Kingdom Hall or
absolutely.
out in field service or grooming anybody. And everybody is just, oh, well, I mean, he said he was sorry. Come on, Silvers, he said he was sorry. So, it's just done and you should just be happy and move on with him, right?
Uh, right.
I mean, it's so
That's
messed up.
exactly what they were saying.
Gosh. Oh,
And
yeah, go
because
ahead.
I did it, because I stood up for myself, and I said, I can forgive somebody, but that doesn't mean I want to hang out with them. It doesn't mean I want to talk to them. It doesn't mean I want to praise them. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean I want to have anything to do with them. I just want to move on. Then I'm labeled as still part of Satan's world because I would not extend that verbal forgiveness to him. Like I had to make, now they're asking me to make the first steps of getting in contact with him to let him know I forgive him, letting him off the hook so he can live this great Jehovah's Witness life, quote unquote, while I deal with the trauma of just allowing that to be okay. So it's
They just don't get it. They
mind
have
blowing.
no,
It's really
yeah,
mind blowing.
it is. They are so they've devolved in the cult and they lack humanity. Their basic humanity has been stripped from them, and they can't do things like perspective taking. They can't look at you and try to take your perspective. All they can see is what would be best for the Jehovah's Witness organization, and and that would be for Grandpa to be in it and for Silvers to be in it as they see it. And now you have extra members, which is that's all they care about. It's all about numbers. It's all about getting people in and on the ark as they see it. And it doesn't matter what happened. They don't care about the details. They don't care about your feelings. It's just about actions and looking a certain way and what you do, but it's not about how you feel about anything or whatever. I mean, clearly you were being very healthy in forgiving him on whatever level. Of course, forgiveness is for you. It's not really for him anyway. Forgiveness
Right.
is something you do so that you can heal. And then, why would you want to hang out with him again? You're clearly not going to want to. And how they cannot see that is an indictment against them and their cult, and how they've conditioned out of people just normal human feelings. Because
Right. They took it as a threat, really, from me that I wouldn't um,
yeah,
comply and talk with him. And it was just really weird how that they, um, well, I don't know about, I won't say they, but my great aunt, but I will say they, will end up putting words in your mouth. Um, um, that I was an ungrateful part of Satan's world, um, and and just really just pushing it back on me now that they've you know, uh, they've given me the opportunity to uh, be a part of God's organization. How they by talking with this guy. Since I didn't, then um, I am continually, demonized for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's all about compliance. Either you comply and come back, or you're evil and you're the devil.
right.
It's so crazy.
I just have to laugh because the other alternative is crying.
Oh,
So,
sure.
and I've gone through enough therapy that it is, even though it is depressing, at times it's very overwhelming, but more so that's overwhelming now is just that I'm 42 and it took this long um, for me. But um, the laughing part comes with, just surviving, I mean, I've got to find something humorous in it or else it will take me down. So,
Oh no, I totally get it. I mean, I'm sure on this podcast I've laughed in spots that people might have felt were inappropriate at times, just because it's such a heavy thing, and it's absurd. It's the absurdity of the situation. Absurdity is a part of humor, and to be able to see that in things, just how absurd they are. Of course, they're super painful things. They're that pain on a level that I'm sure cannot be expressed. There is no word for that pain. Um, Nothing that could accurately convey the deep feelings of that. I mean, you've been through just a tremendous amount of things in your life. I am very grateful though that, I mean, it sounds like you're having an opportunity to heal, you're having an opportunity to find yourself and to work through all this stuff, and you're not alone. There are so many other people um, that have gone through, maybe not exactly the things that you have, but so many of the things that you have, and we all, we all hurt. We were all victims of an organization and of narcissistic, manipulative people, and we all walk away with PTSD. So, or most all of us, I would assume. So, how does your past life? Obviously, you're still working through stuff, but does it still impact you? Are there things you said that you had learned some tools from therapists about dealing with PTSD and such. So, PTSD is not something that just poof magically goes away. What are some things that you've learned about that are helping you in your recovery from all this that you might be able to share with others? Where do you still struggle? What's kind of an update on the emotional situation of Silvers as this has all transpired?
well, just a bit of a quick backstory on whenever I got diagnosed. Um, I did not want to talk to anybody. I didn't realize the depth of what the trauma had done and how long since I had suppressed it. And when it manifested, I um, really didn't want to have anything to do with anyone. The state actually paid for me to go to the to pay for my gas to go to a therapist twice a week initially, and I moved further off the grid, actually into the national forest for about 3 years, um, because I did not want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to see anybody. And when one is isolated and alone, and it's a chosen thing, and I do have the diagnosis at that time of, and do now still, of PTSD, actually CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, then I gathered up a lot of self-help books. I paid attention in therapy. I talked in therapy a lot. And that was my only outlet for a good 3 years. And then I started slowly integrating back into society. And that was a very big challenge for me because I had been isolated in the mountains for off the grid for um, 3 years at that point, but going to therapy twice a week. I did have my dog and a couple of cats then, so they kept me company. And um, the tools that I learned was just to be self-aware, just to be aware of what I'm feeling and try to isolate why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling and try to control my reactions um, to my feelings and also my reactions. What has becoming more in the forefront now is my reactions to other people's behavior. Um, because I didn't realize for the longest time that I had much more control over my reactions to someone else's behavior than I was um, than I was acting on.
That makes sense. Um, I would assume, part of, I claim no expertise here, but I would assume that part of having PTSD and having all these pent up feelings and emotions yourself, holding all of these feelings inside, then when other people behave in a way that is unpleasant, I'm sure it just makes you more reactive because you're holding on to so much inside, and kind of causes that loss of control in the way that you react emotionally to what other people are doing. Um, is that kind of how it is, that you're just holding so much inside?
Sure, sure. I mean, not only do I feel like I felt like, well, I still feel this way that I cannot trust Jehovah's Witnesses at all. Uh,
Yeah.
but I felt like I couldn't trust the world at large around me, and nothing. I mean, there to me there are good and bad people wherever you're going to go, but you know, sometimes or a lot of times having a lot of complex trauma on top of trauma will make one see the world more horrible than it can be.
Yeah.
Um, my mechanism for coping for the longest time um, is running away, and my running away in my adulthood, and especially in my late 20s and 30s, was to go to the mountains. So I get stressed out, which is actually isn't a bad coping thing if done in a planned way. So um, a lot of it was instantly packing up and taking my tent and my animals and going to the mountains for a few months at a time, which is kind of therapeutic. I learned to find a lot of therapeutic uh, tools for me in nature, breathing, meditating. Um, but it also can be counterproductive in that it's running away from society. So right now I try to focus on kind of having a happy medium of knowing, I've got tons of camping gear because after 15 years or so of of exploring the mountains, I've just got a ton of it. So I know that I can go at any time and survive in the mountains and connect with nature like that. um, but it doesn't have to be during a flight or fight uh, response. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be. Uh, it doesn't have to be because of that. I can wait that out and get to a calmer place in myself, and then go, hey, I want to go camping because I want to connect with nature. And sometimes the my symptoms occasionally do flare up to where I'm like, okay, I really do have to today go to um, the waterfall or go up in the mountains and sit by some trees and just relax and take it all in and watch the eagles fly over or whatever animals or birds I see or don't see or so that's how I've tried to level that out because it did get a little lopsided for a while. And then talking with people, I've learned that we've all come. I think everybody has everybody does have a story. Everybody has their own perspective of life. I may not agree with everyone's perspective. I may not. My story is pretty intense sometimes, and there's other people's stories that are really intense too. So it's helped me to talk to people about what I've gone through a little bit, Um, today I'm sort of bearing my soul somewhat, but I've realized that just on daily interactions, I don't have to bare my soul. I can give just a little bit of bits and pieces of my life and be empathetic and understanding. And I find I get that more in return when I'm open to that and not seeing the world through a such a fearful um, lens, if that makes sense.
Oh gosh, man, that's beautiful. So there's a concept called the gap, and it's sometimes we have the propensity to look at how far we've got to go, and we forget how far we've come. And how far we've come is that gap. And when I think about you at I don't know, what'd you say, 32 ish, I think, when you were being diagnosed with PTSD and you didn't want to talk to anybody. And now here you are on a podcast talking to a stranger, bearing your soul, telling your story. I mean, like in that gap there is so much growth, and you have obviously come so far, and you speak so intelligently and not just intellectually showing intelligence, but just emotionally, mentally showing intelligence. You've obviously learned so much in what is a relatively short amount of time, compared to one's life. You've learned things that there are people in their 70s and 80s who have never learned. Sometimes these harsh circumstances force us to learn hard lessons, and it's out of the hardest times in life that we learn some of the most beautiful things. And I just, it's an honor for me that you would talk to me, especially after everything you've shared and where you were at, being diagnosed and everything, not wanting to talk to anybody. I mean, you've obviously come a long way. It doesn't matter how far you've got to go. I mean, you'll keep working on that, I'm sure, but I hope you feel proud of how far you've been able to come already.
You know, I I do feel proud of that, and maybe I it's just hitting me on different levels lately, just how far I have come. Like I would have never imagined, let's say, 20 years ago, whenever I listened to that first radio show about Jehovah's Witness cult, um, I was actually calling to quasi question slash defend the cult, even though I had already gone through so much trauma with the cult, with
Yeah.
the Jehovah's Witness organization, that I would never imagine 20 years later that I would be speaking very, uh, that I would be as knowledgeable as I am about the many different false doctrines and different things like that. But I would also be an um, an advocate for healing and taking a deeper look into this religious cult and the damage it's done. I never thought I'd be able to articulate it in the type of way I'm doing today. Um, when I listened to that recording from years ago, I just and I sounded like a very naive um, um, kid trying to defend something he knew nothing about.
Yeah, we were all there, we've all been that person. Um, it just strikes me, we all, you mentioned something earlier about being 42 years old and all the battles you fought to get where you are today. And, it is easy to look at time that has gone by and to have regrets or to lament, um, the loss of one of the most precious assets we have, that which is time. And I feel the same way. At times I think about how I just turned 41 last weekend, and how I didn't get out till I was 38, and all the time that went by. But if I hadn't have gone through that, and it doesn't mean that I wish I had gone through some of the things I went through. But if I hadn't, then I wouldn't be in the place I am today, where I actually get to do something that's quite rewarding and help people. And for you too, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but had you not gone through what you went through, again, not saying that you would have wished to have gone through it all, here you stand at 42, being able to articulate your story so well that there will be other people out there that hear this that will be helped by it. And it may not make the past go away, and there's still a lot of pain associated with that, but there's a lot of healing that is going on, just I assume in you being able to tell your story today, and then you will facilitate healing for others. And that's what it's all about. We're all going to go through some shit in our lives, whether we were Jehovah's Witnesses or not. Everybody, like you said, has a story, and being able to put it out there and to articulate it as you've done today, you're really able to help other people. And that's something that really is kind of priceless.
I believe so. I really, especially lately, just the more this has been unfolding for me, and how other people's stories have really helped me open up. I want to be a person. I got to thinking about what kind of person, what kind of legacy, if I could choose, what kind of something that people could remember about me. And what I would like to be able to do in my life is to embrace my trauma as much as I can, embrace it in the sense that I did go through it. I'm not going to deny that. But what can I do? What can I take out of this trauma? And what can I tell people? And what kind of hope can I give them to pull through? There are definitely many times I felt beyond hopeless and beyond repair. And sometimes I slip back into that. But I really think the key is talking to people, especially when I'm feeling like that, or even before it gets to that point, to keep reminding myself that people need each other to heal, especially if they can resonate with the trauma and feel like their story is being validated.
Yeah, it's I agree. It's so hard to heal in isolation. I understand that nature is very healing. I feel the same way. But to heal that part of us that is broken by other people, that other people broke, we kind of need other people to help repair. And by telling your story and by being vulnerable and by listening to other people's stories, we can not feel so alone in what we went through, and it can be quite healing. Is there anything that you have that you're hoping to be able to do in the future? Do you talked about your dream life and things like that, and I know you've had some health problems of late, but do you still have any dreams that you're looking forward to or hoping to be able to manifest in your life in the future?
Yes, I do. One of the things, well, or kind of on accident or by accident, I stumbled across living off the living off the grid for so long. So I have a lot of knowledge of how to be self-sustainable. So I'd like to pass some of that knowledge on. There's a lot of stuff out there now talking about that. And also, considering my age and considering what I've gone through, I would like to help other people, and help other people not feel so lost and vulnerable. Whether that's just talking to them, or if I get in a financial position to where I can use that to help other people, that would be great. Um, Other life goals are is just to continue working on my art, and continue doing some writing, um, and just really be open to the experience. I think that's something I've learned recently is as life, you can make plans for how things are going, how you would like things to be, but life does take twists and turns, and just be really open to the journey. But my value system of wanting to help people um, feel not to feel heard is a really big thing for me.
Wow, those are some great goals and things to reach out for. Now, I gotta ask: are we gonna see you on TV on Naked and Afraid someday?
Well, I sure hope so. Naked and afraid, yeah.
Mountain Man.
I thought about it. Or it could be naked with arthritis. I don't know.
No, that's so cool though. That I like I like to camp. I honestly I watched shows like Naked and Afraid, or watched Bear Grylls back in the day, or oh there was another guy who was out at the same time, and I'm blanking on his name, who had a show. Anyway, a Survivor Man, that was it. And I love those shows. I love seeing people be able to do that out in the wild, and to live, and I think that there's a lot of healing to be found in nature. So I think it's beautiful that you have that, those skills, and that place is now maybe a healthier place for you to go to heal. Um, is there anything that I haven't asked you, or anything that you would like to say? Any stories that maybe you didn't get to tell, or anything you'd like to say to people from your past, maybe, who raised you, or people who might, maybe you haven't been able to talk to and you've been shunned by for years? Is there anything you'd like to say?
As far as talking to maybe any family or friends from years ago that have shunned me, there's really nothing I like to say. I did. Um, I think everything's been said.
Yeah.
Um, I sent letters to a lot of family members and to people that were friends, telling them that I love them very much, and um, and basically, since they were shunning me, I actually worded it very nicely, but I'll since they were shunning me, I was therefore not going to talk to them, that I didn't feel like I deserved to be hurt repetitively over and over again. But I didn't phrase it like that. I just said, I love them, and I appreciate that they were in my life, and I wish them the best life that they could possibly have. So there's nothing I want to say beyond that, and I've already said it. So really, it's just focusing forward without them in my life, and it's not a out of vindictiveness. It's um, out of self care,
Yeah.
out of finally learning how to take the steps to or continue the steps on loving myself, because for a long time I did not.
Well, I'm really glad that you've found that ability to kind of love yourself in ways that maybe others didn't. It sounds like there was kind of a dearth of love in a lot of your life, and I think it's great that you've healed enough and are finding that for yourself, and that you've got things that you're looking forward to in life, that you've healed so much. Not that the journey's over, but you've been able to heal so much, and that now you're reaching out and trying to help others to heal. And I just really appreciate you being open and being willing to do this today, for telling your story, for putting yourself out there, and for trying to help others yourself. I think that's beautiful, and I really appreciate you doing that.
And I really appreciate you having me on here. Wonderful for me.
I want to thank Silvers for speaking up. It took a lot of courage to say what he did. Um, and I also promised an update on him. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to share a Facebook post that I made that features this update for him. Actually features a little background as to how we met as well. I'm just going to read it, and I hope that this isn't just an update, but I hope that it encourages you to take action and to see where you can help as well. So, this is what I wrote on Facebook. This isn't just my personal Facebook, but also in the group. This is a long post, but I promise it's worth it. I am posting this below. It's something that makes me feel weird to post, but I'm doing it to make a point. It only takes one person at the right time to change the life of someone else. Be that person. What follows is something that someone posted that mentions someone that helped him. And that someone was me. I found this guy broken and scattered and honestly talking of suicide on an ex-JW forum. All he needed was for one person to believe in him. This isn't to brag, but I have a greater point that I'm going to make after his words which follow. So, now these are the words of Silvers. A direct quote from a post he had made. An interesting story that happened to me on Solstice, but first a backstory for context. A year ago, I let go of all toxic relationships. If there was even a remote question that someone was toxic in my life, I let them go. So as the mental processing began and my brain relaxed enough to start to break it all down, I got real sick a month after with the flu, followed by pneumonia twice. Then my body started flaring up and shutting down. The doctors could not find what was wrong, but there were plenty of possible scary diagnoses. By the end of summer and heading into fall, I was nearly bound to a wheelchair, but used a cane and walker mostly. If there was ever a question whether or not humans need other humans, I am proof. I am fiercely independent to my detriment. I met a person online that really let me vent and listen to me. In fact, this person was awesome enough to make an effort to check in on me via email. My health started to improve rapidly. Everything health-wise and even a bit financially, as the two often go hand in hand, went back to normal and I got in shape again. If it were not for this individual, I would be dead. This person saved me from a certain self-inflicted and or dying of a heartbreak, which can actually happen to a person. Anyway, I busted my butt in the late fall to try to make up for the year's losses after selling most everything to survive. I asked nothing from no one. I simply believed in someone's possible belief in me and rode any wave of that thought. I no longer believed in myself, so it's all I had to go on. I've never even met this person. The last 2.5 months, I worked so hard that I barely remember any of it. I was hoping to be moved out of that remote area I've been stuck in for several years now. I never minded remote areas. In fact, I'm drawn to them. However, the lack of real human interaction has become not good for me mentally at this point in my life. I've lived off the grid and in the mountains for over a decade now, with a 2-year break. So I am no stranger to my thoughts and to being alone. But humans need other humans. The big move did not happen, but I did get moved into a slightly better place. Back to Solstice. I always try to do something just for myself that day, usually or 99% of the time alone, even when I had a lot of friends. This year something odd happened on Solstice night. My computer crashed, losing all my data from the last 20 years. I had a DVD and VCR combo that was left over from a toxic relationship, and it too crashed that night. The phone I had from the toxic era of toxic friends also died on Solstice. I normally would have been upset about seemingly all my electronics with years worth of data gone, but I wasn't. I felt like I was set free. I continued to have my Solstice fire through the night and the next. I feel like it was a major cleansing for me. I didn't get to celebrate Thanksgiving or Christmas because I was working so hard. Maybe online it looks like I was celebrating, but I wasn't. I was simply rushing through them to go to work. I'm totally okay with that, going through quick motions of the holidays on the same day everyone else seemingly celebrates. So a few days ago, I crashed from working my butt off and hit a temporary low. It lasted a day. Then the next day, I dusted myself off and went to a gig for a very manipulative client. On the way, which happened every time, I would get nauseated. This person lacked empathy, and it flowed out and really affected me. He knew nothing of my year or troubles, but it hit me that I didn't want that type of client, that I am worth so much more. I let him go and feel amazing. Yes, money will be very tight this winter, unless the universe has more wishes to grant upon up its sleeve. I've decided to take all of January off to celebrate, regroup, and love myself. The love I've needed more than anything. My Christmas, New Year's, and even Thanksgiving will be the theme all month. My tree is lit, and I still have presents for my fur baby and myself to open. If you made it this far, wow, what an attention span for Facebook reading, lol. I find it serendipitous that the electronics that had negative things from toxic past relationships simply went in one night. This is why I love this year's solstice. This is why my holidays are going to be an all-month affair during January. Lastly, but nowhere least, thank you to the one person that was willing to give me a small amount of their time. It's the only reason I feel I got so far after such a year. So, this was his post, and then I continued, or that was his quote, and I continued. It meant the world to me to see him write this, and to know that I helped in some way. But this isn't about patting myself on the back. When I was at my lowest in 2008 and was suicidal myself, it took one person to show me genuine interest and kindness and to point out something that helped me. After making a ton of changes in my life, healthy changes that would lead me out of the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses that I was in, I looked once more for a person. I reached out to get a therapist, and I only had one visit. Why? All I needed was for someone to tell me that I was all right. I was so alone on an island with the whole J-Dub thing at the time, and I just needed one person to see me, hear me, and tell me that I was a good person put in a weird and culty place. I never went back. So I post this to ask you, who can you be that one person for? Who could you show that you believe in, or who could you just listen to? You may never know the impact that you're making. You may not get a message like the one above, but you still may make a huge difference to someone. Look for opportunities to listen to someone that is hurting, to hear them out. Don't tell them that everything they do is wrong. Just listen. Let them know that you are there, and then be there. Obviously, you have to watch that you don't get sucked dry by energy vampires that latch on with no design on making real changes in their lives. But the right word at the right time could really make a difference for someone who was looking for something better. That's why this guy came to the forum I was on. He was looking. That should be rewarded with others that reach back. I'm so glad that I saw what was happening because the forum he was on is pretty rough. It was the forum that first helped me, but you have to go in with super thick skin. It's not for everyone, and I shudder to think of what may have happened if I and at least one other poster hadn't been there to be kind to this guy that was so down and hurt by so many awful things. One person helped me turn my entire life around. Now I got to be that one person to someone else. So when you see someone hurting, please reach out. You too might just be that one person to someone and change a life. So maybe you'd like to start by sending a message of support to Silvers. If you'd like to, you can do so by going to shunnedpodcast.com, where you can leave a comment for him on the episodes page. You're also going to find the resources that were mentioned in the episode there, and the video for the song that he chose to represent his journey. Silvers chose the song Love by Lana Del Rey to represent his journey. All right. Now, that's not the only place that you can comment on the episode. We also have a Facebook group called Shunned Podcast that's really growing, where we have people discussing episodes and their own lives. And I try to do things there to encourage people to find good things in life and grow. As I stated earlier, I want to give you some highlights from the past few weeks, just to give you an idea of the group that we have. Every Wednesday, we post things we're happy about in life for the week. Every weekend, we post things that we're doing for ourselves as part of self-care. This weekend, immediately this weekend when I'm releasing this, we're going to have our second show and tell Sunday, where people can post pics and talk about some things they had that were cool or that meant something to them. Being shunned, we don't have a lot of people with us anymore that we can share, cool things that we enjoy with. And so this is a chance for people to share and build community. One of our members actually announced this month that he's having his first kid on the group. before he did anywhere else. And I don't know, that really meant a lot to me that he did that. Um, you know, I see the group as kind of its own little family. You know, many of us are missing our families. And, not only this guy has bought a house that unfortunately, he never got to share with his actual blood family. But, now he's about to have he's going to announce his that he's going to have his first kid. And so he did that on the group first. And that meant a lot to me personally. And I'm also going to be announcing something pretty big in there in the next coming weeks, as I typically try to put things up in the group first if I can. So there's things happening in there. My goal is to keep it more about us as individuals and our stories and supporting one another and forming community than just keeping up with the latest J-Dub stuff. I put a new way to interact with the show up on the website at shunnedpodcast.com, where you can leave me a voice message for use on the podcast. Now, on the last episode, I asked a question, but nobody responded. So rather than do that, what I'm going to just encourage is if you have anything, if you have something you need or want to say, just go to the site, click on that tab on the right, and you can tell me whatever you want. Tell me a quick funny story about your life in the cult. Give me suggestions for the show. Ask me a question. Maybe I'll answer it on the next episode and include your question. This is an easy way for you to be part of the show if you like. So you can use whatever device you have, whether it's your computer, tablet, phone, whatever. Just click on the tab on the right of whatever page you're on at shunnedpodcast.com, and I'll get the message. If you haven't been to the site lately, you'll see that I've even got some Shun swag up there now. I have some nice t-shirts and a hoodie with the Shun logo on them that look nice. People seem to really like them. I also have some more ideas that I'll get up there soon, but all in due time. So it's a way you can support the show and get a pretty cool shirt or hoodie at the same time. You can also find the podcast on YouTube under the channel called Shunned Podcast, on Instagram at Shunned Podcast, and on Twitter at Shunned Podcast, and all of those are Shunned Podcast as one word. If you'd like to hear my story and a great insight into how the Cult of Jehovah's Witnesses works, you can do so at the podcast, my original podcast, called This JW Life, also found at thisjwlife.com. I want to take the time to thank people who have really helped me make this show possible by helping to support it financially. This month, both Matthew and Nico signed up to help and support the show. Seriously, the show takes not just work and time, but there's costs involved in getting audio hosted, websites hosted, and getting transcripts made, keeping equipment working. I also spend a great deal of time helping people through emails and my Facebook group and other social media. So, you can really help support me in my efforts for as little as $1 a month. And it means the world to me to know that others are in this with me, that people believe in me and believe in what I'm doing here. So it's encouraging to see people that want to support it. You can do so at Patreon, Patreon. So it's patreon.com/shunned if you are so inclined. Oh, and if you don't have the opportunity or are not inclined to do so in a monetary way, one way that you can support the show, both the Shun podcast and this JW Life, is to head to iTunes and leave a 5-star review for them. It helps them get found in the search engine. That's what all these things are, like iTunes and different things. They're essentially search engines of podcasts. So it helps it to get found in the searches, shows that it's popular, and then more people can find it. And the more people that find it, the more people we can help. So the next episode is going to be the story of Daniel. Daniel is not shunned right now. However, part of shunning isn't just the actual shunning, it's the fear of shunning and how it keeps people stuck in the cult. So we have a PIMO, someone who is physically in but mentally out, PIMO. He's one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we've done some things to protect his identity. I think that you're going to find this fresh look at things pretty interesting. We're going to go ahead and close the show out now with the song No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. You can find a link to her song, to the Patreon page for the show, to resources mentioned, and more, not just on the website, but if you're listening on a podcast app, you can probably get it all in the app by looking at the description. So as we all end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
Praise God.